From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Sports Line.
Hey there, Sports Line on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us on Monday night on NewsChannel 5 Plus. Oh man, things are flying. It is fast and furious on this Monday. You've got the NCAA brackets out. We missed that, of course, last year. They're back. The NCAA tournament is going to tip off on Thursday. It's going to look a little bit different. It's all going to be in the state of Indiana. Days are going to be a little adjusted because of some of the protocols, but the NCAA tournament field of 68 is out and basketball will be played. This evening, the NCAA women's tournament unveiled its field on its selection show. Have 3 area teams in that. We will get to that coming up. And then you have the silly season in the NFL, and it has been a busy day looking around the league at what things have happened so far. And the Titans have been very active here in just the last hour or so. Here are the big news of the Titans from today. First and foremost, and we kind of saw this coming, we discussed it last week on the program. The Titans are officially parting ways with both Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith. Both guys seem to just price themselves out of what the Titans were willing to pay for their services. And so today, Jonnu Smith, a guy who has the handle on social media of Easy Money, cashed in a big way in New England. A 4-year, $50 million deal, 31 of that guaranteed for Jonnu Smith, who now goes to play for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Corey Davis goes to New York to play for the Jets. 3 years, $37.5 million. Both of those deals north of what, $12 million a year? Both of them? So that's what you're dealing with there. Titans did not seem willing to want to do that. Both of those guys earned it, and so they leave in that situation. It's been very clear, though, what the Titans are focused on, and it'll probably be music to a lot of people's ears out there, and that is the pass rush. Because it is reported now that the Titans have agreed to terms on a contract with former Steelers linebacker Bud Dupree. It's going to be for north of $16 million, we understand. $16 million to bring in a pass rusher. Dupree has 19.5 sacks in 27 games over the past 2 years. 24 tackles for loss in that time, 32 QB hits. He's been an absolute terror and a disruptor, which are not adjectives used to describe the Titans' pass rush in any way, shape, or form in recent days. So Dupree could change them very dramatically when you just get him into the mix. And obviously you've got Harold Landry back on the other side. Hopefully those two can work well in tandem together. And it is also believed that the Titans will be signing former Raiders and Colts defensive lineman Denico Autry. Big 6'6" guy up front who's good against the run. Also has 30.5 career sacks, more than 200 tackles. He would be a nice piece up front with Big Jeff Simmons. Autry's deal is reportedly in the 3-year range and gonna just be a person who can come in and really bolster the Titans up front. And then just recently, the Titans have also seemingly agreed to terms with offensive tackle Kendall Lamb, played for the Browns. Actually, last year he caught a touchdown pass in the Cleveland win here against Tennessee in December. But Kendall Lamb is a guy who will provide immediate offensive depth on the line up front. Maybe don't go through the offensive line drill in the draft after Isaiah Wilson was such a bust. So that's important, to bring that to a place where you feel good about. And we saw last year how important offensive linemen are. I mean, when Taylor Lewan went down, the Titans were fortunate that they had a backup sitting there in Ty Sambrailo. And then when he went down, they had another backup sitting there in David Quesenberry. And so bringing in Kendall Lamb, a guy who's experienced and has played well in the league, I think is an important move because we saw how important that tackle position was last year. So the Titans have been very busy. Other teams have been very busy. No team has been more busy than the Patriots. It's bizarre. A team that normally is fairly reserved in free agency now has all this cap space to play with when other teams do not. And the Patriots have been all over it today. 6, if not 7 reported signings up there, including Jonnu Smith, including Matt Judon, the pass rusher out of Baltimore. They've got defensive back help, Kendrick Bourne coming in as a wide receiver. They are doing some things up there in New England to try to right the ship after a disappointing season last year. And it looks like they may be doing that if Belichick can pull all these pieces together and really build a team moving forward. Lots of other moves out there. The Texans have brought in a couple guys. The Jaguars have brought in a couple guys. Colts have been very quiet so far today. Haven't seen much there within the division, but lots and lots going on in the NFL today. We can talk about that. 737-7767. What is your reaction to the Titans going out and reportedly, we don't know yet, we're in that legal tampering period where these negotiations are allowed, but you can't officially sign until 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. But for all intents and purposes, it appears that the Titans have gotten Danico Autry up front on defense. They've gotten Bud Dupree to be a pass rush outside linebacker and Kendall Lamb to provide some depth and help them up front on the offensive line. What are your reactions to that news? What's your reaction there? What do you think about what the Titans are trying to do, especially when you have to weigh in the fact that Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis are leaving? I mean, those were 2 very good players that were valued by the franchise and certainly loved by the fans around here on teams that, you know, have been to 3 playoffs in 4 years that they were here, including an AFC Championship game. They had a strong level of success. But they're gone. How do you view them leaving versus what the Titans are bringing in? And do you agree with the philosophy? Because I was pretty adamant on here. One thing I was worried about, given the salary cap, and trust me, I am not a numbers cruncher guy when it looks at the NFL just because there's so many hidden values, and I don't like math that much to begin with. I was told there would be no math, but I don't dive into that salary cap stuff a lot, and this year it was incredibly complicated because it's dropping, and it went down to $182.5 million, and we didn't even know that was going to be the case or the final number that it would drop to until late on last week. I don't dive into those numbers very much, but given where the Titans were and knowing that it was going to drop, it just seemed hard to me that they would be able to make a ton of moves defensively to make up the deficiencies that they had last year, where they had a great offense. But part of what made that offense great was the versatility and the dynamic nature of both Davis and Smith. And so I thought if you can work out anything, try to pay those guys, or at least one of them, to try to keep the offense going in the direction you have it going and don't allow it to regress. Where defensively, I don't know how much you'd have to spend to improve it. Well, we'll see. Both Davis and Smith got more on the open market than I probably would have projected they were going to get. So that helps soften the blow a little bit because I don't know if you'd feel great about paying $12.5 million for Jonnu Smith next year or the year after. I don't know if you'd feel great about paying more than $12 million for Corey Davis when you have A.J. Brown waiting in the wings needing to get paid soon. Conversely, The Titans have obviously been able to go out and make some moves on the defensive side of the ball. And I think there's no question in terms of the question, can the Titans impact the passer, impact the line of scrimmage in a way that they weren't able to do last year? I think the signings of Danico Autry up front and Bud Dupree as a pass rusher could go a long way in that regard. Could go a real long way. Titans are going to have some questions in the secondary. Obviously, they cut Malcolm Butler last week. Where do you make up for that? Can you draft a quarterback that you're ready for? Is Adoree Jackson going to be totally healthy and ready when he comes back this season? Those are questions. Christian Fulton did not have a big impact last year because of injuries and other things. Can he take his game to the next level? Safety, I worry a little bit less about. Obviously, you cut Kenny Vaccaro last week, salary cap casualty, but Amani Hooker played a fair amount down the stretch last year, and I think he played fine. So I think you can put Hooker out there with Kevin Byard and feel good about what your starting safety situation looks like. And let's not forget as well, Dane Cruikshank last year, who they like for the things he's able to do and some of the versatility he brings. He is a stalwart on special teams when he plays. He barely played last year because of injury, and because of that, you just kind of forget about him. But presuming he's healthy, he brings another body at that position that, frankly, the Titans trust and believe in. And if they have to go to him for a few plays here or there, I think they'll feel okay with that. So I don't think there has to necessarily be a signing at that position just because Kenny Vaccaro is out. But what you saw today is you saw moves up front that changed the complexion of this defense, frankly, in a way that I wasn't sure they would be able to do in free agency. So credit to John Robinson for that, at least on the front end. You know, last year we spent a lot of time crediting the Titans for going after Jadeveon Clowney and ultimately getting him. You add in a guy like Vic Beasley as well. There were some concerns of the Beasley signing, the salary, what his motivation level would be. But remember, that was a guy who once was the NFL sacks leader who was looking for a fresh start. And I think a lot of people thought he might fit in well here in Tennessee, and then he actually got here, and it was a total disaster. That's to say you don't know how any of these things will ultimately pan out, but on paper, it looks like John Robinson did some impressive work to help the Titans front seven on the defensive side of the ball and to better impact the quarterback as well. Let's get to your phones now. 737-7767 is the number. Your thoughts on the moves today, either guys going out, guys coming in, or anything else around the National Football League as well. We begin tonight with Lowell. Lowell, good evening. You are first up here on Sportsline. How are you?
Oh, doing fine. How about yourself?
Good. Thanks for the call.
Yes, sir. Quick question. We were talking football. We were talking Titans. I might have tuned in late to hear any discussion around Derrick Henry, but I want to know the realistic chances of this man eclipsing 2,000 yards. You know, to be the first NFL running back in history to do back-to-back. I know Barry Sanders had 3 2,000-yard seasons, but I mean, that was the biggest thing I was paying attention to this year was Derrick Henry, just trying to get to that 2,000 yards because obviously it was a big deal when Chris Johnson did it. And yeah. I just want to know if you, based on your expertise of following the team, probably a little closer to me, the returning offensive line, I want to know what are his chances if he stays healthy, eclipsing 2,000 yards again this year.
Well, Lowell, thanks for the call. And I would love to say call back in about 2 months when we have a full picture of what free agency looked like and then the draft for the Titans. Obviously, it's difficult to do that. It's like repeating as Super Bowl champions. To come back and do it again and take that workload and the beating to get back to 2,000 yards again, I think is very difficult to do. I even think the Titans might like to police his carries a little bit more, but at the same time, he's their best player. He's how they win a lot of the games they do. So it's not going to be a drastic reduction in workload. And if he can run with the same level of effectiveness behind an offensive line that probably will be healthier next year than it was this year. I mean, remember, the best offensive lineman on the team is Taylor Lewan, and he missed the last 2/3 of the season. The second best offensive lineman on the team is Roger Saffold, and while he played all but one game, I'm not sure he was ever not on the injury list. He played through pain the entire year. Ben Jones did that much of the season as your center. And then, of course, the right tackle situation. A lot of people thought at the beginning of the year Isaiah Wilson was going to be the right tackle as a first-round draft pick, and it ended up being Dennis Kelly. So I think the offensive line is going to be even better this coming season. The question I have, though, and this is why I want to see what happens the rest of this spring before I give any kind of a definitive prediction on this, is at the moment, who do you throw to? Because that's part of what made the Titans offense great. Is yes, Derrick Henry was a 2,000-yard rusher, but there was always balance there. I mean, remember the first half in Indianapolis when the Titans just blitzed the Colts? I forget the exact yardage total, but they were within 1 yard of rushing and passing of each other at the half. I mean, that is absolute balance. And in the NFL, they always sort of tell you that if it's like 2/3 pass, 1/3 rush, that's almost balance the way the game is played now. And the Titans at times looked like a 50-50 team in terms of production and what they were doing. I want to be able to see them do that again because I think that's important for Derrick to be able to churn out the yards he does, to have the yards per carry average that he does. And considering the fact I think they want to give him a few less carries, he's got to have a high yards per attempt. He's got to be efficient in those carries to have any shot at 2,000 yards. And he could do that this year because you had two receivers that were essentially 1,000-yard receivers in A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. And you had a tight end in Jonnu Smith who is an absolute red zone machine and caught 40-some balls himself. And that's why those guys got paid. But how do you replace that? Who steps in at tight end to give you a weapon there? Who else is going to catch a ball at wide receiver? I mean, right now it is A.J. Brown, and that is basically it. Everybody else has like 7 career catches. There is no more Corey Davis. There is no more Adam Humphries at that position. And so who else is going to be out there to catch those balls? If the Titans can create the balance in the passing game that they had, then yeah, I think it's possible behind a even better offensive line, or hopefully a more healthy offensive line up front. I think it's possible Derrick Henry can be just as effective. But if you take that passing game away, or if the Titans significantly regress in the passing game, well, then all of a sudden you can really load the box on Derrick Henry. And I don't know if he'll be able to have the same level of success if that's the case. So we'll see. I would say right now, if you were a betting man, bet against a second straight 2,000-yard season from Derrick Henry. But if the right pieces fall in place and that offense can pick up where it left off in all phases, then yeah, I think it's entirely possible Henry could be effective enough behind that offensive line to potentially at least give it a run for another NFL rushing title, which would be a 3rd in a row, which would be mighty impressive. If not, stretch it out and be even better. I will say this, Roger Saffold did say at the end of the season, the line's goal is to be better next year, and Henry's goal is to be better next year. 2,027 yards, that'll be the number they want to top. That will be their goal going into the season. So, being great last year, not satisfying anybody in that room, including Henry himself. Back to the phones we go. Let's say hello to David. David, welcome to the program. How are you tonight?
I'm all right, man. Got the second shot today, so I'm a little hoping that I don't get any little symptoms here. But I'm doing good right now. I'm excited. 3 points. Number one, Derrick Henry has a 17th game this year to get to 2,000.
Yep.
So there's that. Number two, the Titans, even back in the mediocrity, have always had, whether it's Jared Cook. Oh, my God, how can we replace Jared Cook? Here comes Delaney Walker. Anthony Fasano, he's been so valuable. We replaced Walker, we replaced Fasano, we replaced Stevens. Tight end doesn't bother me. I think they'll find a tight end. The Corey Davis it's up in the air. That one I was, we haven't had that second-rate wide receiver. We haven't had one great wide receiver until Brown, and we haven't had that second good guy, since ever. So I'm a little worried about losing Davis, but maybe the people who I don't follow the draft, I don't follow college as much. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of good receivers in the draft. So I support the idea of taking the salary from the offense and adding to the defense. Once again, I have no worries about replacing Smith. Davis, perhaps.
Yeah. No, I think that's good stuff, David. Thanks for the call. Look, tight end is a position that the Titans have sort of generally been able to fill and put guys in and put them in good positions. I think one guy that is important to bring back right at this exact moment is Anthony Ferkser, because he's been a part of that passing offense before. He's shown an ability to get open. And so if you end up finding other guys that are more blocking type tight ends, at least Ferkser would give you that guy at that position that can get open and you know what you have there. So I think that's an important piece for the Titans to think about keeping over the next handful of days. But I agree. I've always said that if I was prioritizing things on the offense, if you let me have carte blanche, again, I was worried about the offense because they were phenomenal, and they were the reason the Titans were good last year. And really the reason they were good at the end of the season a couple of years ago was when Tannehill went in and the offense took off. But I am worried about getting that same production at the wide receiver position with Davis gone. And that's why I was willing to look at that contract. That said, he's getting over $12 million a year. And I'm not sure I thought it was going to go to that place. And so the idea that it did, are you willing to pay that? And it became clear over the weekend the Titans were not willing to go over $12 million for either Davis or Smith. And that's why they're gone at this point in time. So it'll be interesting to see what they do on that offensive side of the ball to try to replace either Smith at tight end, and really to fill out the roster at wide receiver. It's not just replacing Corey Davis. It's finding any bodies who have any proven ability in the NFL to catch passes. Now, it is supposedly a good and deep wide receiver class this year in the NFL draft. So maybe you can go in there and find maybe even a couple guys to come in and help you out right away. I think wide receiver is a position where if you're talented enough, you can really expect a guy to come in and produce right off the bat. See A.J. Brown 2 years ago. Even Corey Davis, he struggled so much with injuries in his first couple of years with the Titans, but even Corey Davis, when he was actually on the field as a rookie, made an impact to what they were trying to do. So maybe they can find some guys in the draft that can help them out right away. But it is clear the Titans are making the moves right now to bolster that defense that was so problematic, even at the expense of some of the good players on the offense who, frankly, carried them to the heights they have reached over the last 2 seasons. Back to the phones we go. Lines are open, by the way, 737-7767, the number. Let's say hello to Tony. Tony, how are you?
Yeah, good morning. I'm glad you be able to talk to me tonight. I'm trying to understand about this money thing, about this salary cap. But see, I don't understand, like, the pro basketball people, they didn't have a problem with salary cap. But the football league, that means these owners are hoarding the money. Because all of them got that stimulus money, like the Lakers and all of them. And it wasn't no need to cut it down like that. Everybody in the society got some of this stimulus money, including these businessmen, these football owners. So, and that really makes everything complicated. So now, look like to me, they're going to have to get a bunch of guys off the practice squad. But if they wanted to, they'd be able to afford to pay them. So I don't understand why the league, the Dallas Cowboys, New England, and all of them all of a sudden come up with this money. They put somebody on there. And the Titans, they showing their true colors. They've never kept anybody. Stability has always been their problem. And they're showing again. So I just want you to understand, explain that to me. What is they doing with this stimulus money that everybody got, especially to them?
So, okay.
That Trump gave them.
First off, there were a couple professional sports teams like the Lakers, who you mentioned, who applied for the small business loans and various things. Every single one of them paid it back after the backlash that multi-million-dollar sports teams got it at the expense of some other businesses. So no professional sports franchise got stimulus money in that regard at this point. Every professional sports franchise is hurting based off of the economics of the pandemic. The NBA, I'm looking for the exact change that came in, but there's no question that the NBA salary cap is decreased this season. It's putting every team, I'm looking back at, it dipped in the neighborhood of $7 or $8 million ultimately at the beginning of the year. It's not as big of a dip as what the NFL had, but it's also a different sport. So the NBA salary cap went down. The NHL salary cap went down. Major League Baseball's salary cap is going down, and they played last year on a truncated season in the middle of the pandemic. The NFL is not alone on this. And the other thing that the NFL has that nobody else has, which makes the NFL different here, is the NFL has this looming contract negotiation with their television rights holders. And that is going to be a massive deal for the NFL. So in everybody's estimation, this is a one-year dip to kind of make up for what happened last year and to get through this year. And then when that deal gets announced, everything will move forward, and it will move forward rapidly. So from a player's perspective, this year kind of stinks. It especially stinks if you're a high-priced veteran that they think they might be able to get someone a little bit cheaper to do your job. But this is life in sports in the pandemic. It is not at all tied just to the NFL. This is not an NFL deal of owners being greedy. This is just life right now in these professional sports. In terms of the Titans' question, have they lost people? Yeah, that's kind of the name of the game in the NFL, though. And let's not forget that the Titans' two biggest players that hit free agency last year were Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry. Probably the two most important pieces on the entire team. And they kept them. They paid them. I think they got good deals for both of them, frankly. But they didn't let those guys walk. You're talking about a quarterback that's in the top half of the league. You're talking about a running back that is the two-time rushing champion. They locked them down because they were great players. A.J. Brown is going to get a deal from the Titans because he's a great player, just like Kevin Byard got a deal from the Titans as a safety because he's a great player. I bet Jeff Simmons is going to get a deal. Probably Harold Landry, going to get a deal. You know, Taylor Lewan got a deal. So the guys who have absolutely proven themselves as elite players that probably cannot be replaced are getting deals. The Titans are not shying away from that. They're not paying guys. They're not being cheap. That's not something you can say about the Titans realistically anymore. Maybe 10 years ago, maybe when Bud Adams was around, but that's not something you can say now. They are spending money. The problem last year is they spent money in places that just totally didn't pan out for them. We talked about Clowney. We talked about Beasley. Those guys weren't cheap. They were big-time free agent signings. They just didn't pan out. But the Titans have re-signed their own when it makes sense to re-sign their own. Delaney Walker got a big deal when he came here and became a Pro Bowler. The Titans have been willing to do that. Right now, they're going to have to spend a lot of time in the draft. They need to hit in the draft because with the salary cap going down, there just isn't enough money to go around to keep everybody that you maybe like to. I mean, I'll tell you this much. The Titans love Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith. It's not a thing where Mike Vrabel and John Robinson sat there around the meeting table and said, you know who I think we can do without? Corey Davis. That guy was nearly a 1,000-yard receiver. He's one of the best blockers downfield in the NFL, certainly at that position as a wide receiver. We can do without him. That wasn't a conversation they had. I promise you that. They loved Corey Davis. They loved Jonnu Smith. But at the end of the day, you got to make decisions. And this year, the decisions are harder for the Titans and the 31 other teams as well because of the salary cap restrictions. And so when it comes down to it, you got to make decisions. How do you make your football team the best you possibly can, given the $182.5 million that you get to spend this year? And when you look out there, $12 million plus for Jonnu or for Corey, probably not the best expenditure, especially when you're trying to make those moves on the defensive side of the ball. And that's where the Titans made the decision. And again, today, Jonnu Smith going to New England, Corey Davis going to the Jets. So 2 guys stay in the AFC, but in the AFC East. And the Titans make some moves defensively, bringing in Bud Dupree, bringing in Danico Autry, and bringing in Kendall Lamb for some offensive line depth up front. We got to take a break. Our phone lines are still open, 737-7767. Love to talk more about free agency with the Titans. We can get into the NCAA women's bracket, men's bracket as well. Stay tuned. You're watching Sports Live on News Channel 5 Plus.